I'm Dr. Jared Jones. I've already introduced myself in the past 62 videos, so I think I'll give it a rest. I'm here to teach a bit of meditation to those people who are interested in learning about meditation in a modern context here in the real world. If that sounds interesting to you, then welcome. Welcome indeed. Uh, kind of exciting news today for those who are following me on other social media channels. There's a gentleman I've been working with. I have the link in the chat there, Neil Ripsky. He's a lineage holder for a rare lineage of Southern Shaolin martial arts. But not just martial arts, it is a complete system for longevity, health, also has spiritual aspects, making the body work properly for meditation, making the energy system work better for meditation, and actually a full meditative system as well, called 18 Lohan Palm. Quite exciting. Today, his main teacher, the gentleman from whom we have received this lineage, we got his book. We got his book. Apparently, his daughter had a copy, but it's the only copy that we know of. She said there were some other copies somewhere, but wasn't quite sure where they were. And a student in Hong Kong was going through all of the Chinese language websites having to do with used books and found a copy of his book from 1996. 30, 30 years ago. A very small print from a publisher in Guangzhou, China, and she found it. So it just arrived here today. Here it is. She shipped it to me, and there he is, Dr. Chen Qiming, when he was a young man. So very precious, very rare, very difficult to get, but we have it. And so I was able to make a PDF of it today since it's out of print, and we're going to have it translated for all the people that are involved in the Lohan Palm course. There'll be chunks of the book in that course now once they're translated. And Neil also studied with the gentleman for 20 years thereabouts, so he's already received teachings on a huge amount of the material, I would assume, that's in the book, since it was written in 96, and Neil met him in 2002, I believe, and then trained with him until he passed away in 2022, somewhere thereabouts. So Neil is also, we're thinking, going to be writing a little bit of commentary on the text once we have it in English. And perhaps with a bit of luck, that will also sort of all be published as one thing at some point. That's quite a ways down the road, but it's here. We have the actual book. There it is. So very, very cool. This is, according to him, part of, let's say, the culmination of all of one of his teachers' hard work in trying to understand the confluence in terms of just health and longevity between the Buddhist teachings on health and longevity, Confucian, Taoist, and modern scientific and traditional Chinese medical teachings as well. And then, of course, he was himself from a very young age a practicing traditional Chinese medical doctor, and his family were people of that kind also. They did that kind of work in the community, and it was really interesting. I just popped a couple of pages into like an AI translator just to see what the introduction said and the forward said and all that. Really remarkable. Uh, Blue Eyes, the book. This book is by Neil Ripsky's teacher, Dr. Chen Qiming, and it's his book on longevity. It's his book on longevity. Quite interesting. Neil has apparently, maybe, I don't know. We don't really know what the content of the book is. That's part of why we're excited to get it translated and see what he has to say. Neil has been wanting to have it translated and to read it since probably the early 2000s, and we have it. So the work will begin. Uh, I mean, in terms of general meditation to help with smoking, I think in general training in mindfulness can help with addiction. But I think you need to combine it with some sort of specialized stuff related to overcoming your nicotine addiction. But having mindfulness based practices alongside that can be helpful. You know, at least according to the literature. Right. So very pleased, very pleased. We got the book. Everyone should say thank you to Sweet and Sour for getting this, sleuthing this book down, finding it. If you're part of the Lohan course, as I said, this material, some of it will very likely find its way into the supplementary materials for the course. So very precious. Just from translating with the help of AI, hey Oates, just from doing like a very rough translation with the help of AI today, I translated the foreword and the preface, which were by two different people. They weren't even by Dr. Chen himself. They were two other people that were sort of singing his praises, actually. And it was what really blew me away. For those of you who are involved in the Lohan thing, also, what really blew me away is that they mentioned way before, because remember, this is '96. This is before Neil and him even knew each other. In the foreword for his book, written in 1996, there are other gentlemen from China who are writing the preface and writing the. Actually, I'll just grab it and I'll show you guys. Let's see. Writing the preface and writing the foreword for the book. And check this out. I thought this was interesting. So, of course, anytime you're dealing with martial arts in the modern world, it's good to have a little bit of, to do a little bit of homework and make sure that people are who they say they are and they trained where they say they did. And of course, eventually also that they have the skills that they say they have, right? This is an important thing to do. Not just because you don't trust people or something, but beyond that, if you have more confidence in where the information is coming from, you'll study it harder, you'll remember more of it, you'll take it more seriously. In Tibetan literary practice, they call this the greatness of the teacher and the greatness of the lineage or the teaching. And so if you have those details, it helps you to do what you're trying to do even better because your attitude about it changes, right? So I've been trying to, as some of you know, do a bit of sleuthing about Dr. Chen to find more records of the things that he did and when and how, blah blah blah, so that we can put together something like this. Right. Okay. So what's really, really, really interesting is, oh, I forgot there's a character limit for. Gosh, YouTube's chat is so annoying. Okay, if Oates, if you'll put the link for the Discord in, I'll pop this over on the Discord right now for people who are interested in this, and I'll pop it in the Lohan part of the Discord. Discord. Right. And then I'll just read it in English. Right. Okay. So, oh wow, even on Discord they say it's too long. All right. Ah, okay. Let me get the image. I'll add the image later. Okay, so listen to this, right? So one of the things that I learned about Dr. Chen when when I was talking to Neil is that he was raised in a family of Chinese medical doctors, and that the way that he learned Lohan is that he treated a monk for free who was an itinerant, sort of part of an itinerant group coming from Tibet, which is a thing that the monasteries do, and that they had sent this group out to go exchange some information with Buddhist monks in China, which again is something that they do. So this is all quite plausible, right? This is a fairly normal practice. As a matter of fact, when I was in elementary school, a group of monks, Gelok monks, came and did this at my elementary school. So this is something that they do all over the place. So very interesting. Listen to this. So this is the forward written by someone else, not written by Dr. Chen himself, but written by Ye Jingguo of Heishan. And he says, Chen Qiming is a native of, and he lists the places he's from. He inherited his family's learning. Upright and principled by nature, intelligent, perceptive, filial, and respectful, he began practicing medicine at an early age. So, once again, he inherited his family's medical knowledge. So, this is exactly what basically he was told, right? Or what Neil was told. Furthermore, listen to this. Again, long before he met Neil, this is 8 years before he met Neil, in a preface for a book written by, or a forward for a book written by someone else, not written by Dr. Chen himself. Listen to this. When poor and sick people were in Guangzhou, which is where he practiced medicine, when they sought his help, he treated them without discussing payment and frequently gave them medicine as well. When wealthy patients came repeatedly to his door for consultation, he likewise never charged excessively. Through his medical virtue, his reputation spread throughout the western part of the city. And for those of you who don't know, Dr. Chen Qiming also, um, towards the later part of his life, ended up in Canada because he was with an organization that was doing an exchange program, basically with Canada, a cultural exchange. But he would go back to Guangzhou and he would teach at universities, and he has research papers in TCM medical journals in China. So he was quite well known. He's a very well known person and highly respected. Also, in the preface, it mentions that he trained at was also quite serious about his martial arts and entered the Jingwu tradition. Jingwu being a virtually legendary martial arts organization in China. And we've also looked this up. There was in Guangzhou at the time that he was living there, there was a branch of Jingwu. So we know that's true, right? And here now we have a second source, 1996, before he knew Neil, saying the exact same thing. So that he was raised in a family of doctors, that he treated a bunch of people for free, and that he taught at Jingwu, right? So this is already quite good in terms of building people's confidence about the honesty, uprightness, and so forth of this individual. And so the story that's told about how he got his Lohan, about how Chen Qiming got his Lohan, is that he treated a monk who was on a group, part of an itinerant group of monks coming from Tibet to do an exchange with some monks in Guangzhou. And by the way, let me. Oh, I can't put it in the chat. From my student in Hong Kong who has access to the Chinese internet, she was looking up all the temples in Guangzhou, and there are temples that go back to like the 900s and 800s. There are historic Buddhist temples in Guangzhou that are huge organizations. So these would have very likely been organizations that very well established Tibetan monasteries and so forth would have been aware of, right? So again, this all sort of lines up. These Tibetan monks come to Guangzhou. He treats them. He says, "Hey, look, I'm a Buddhist, and I'm not going to charge you money to return you to health, right? This is not something I could do." And the guy says, "Okay, well, there's a martial art I learned that we trained in at the monastery that apparently came from Shaolin when they destroyed the southern Shaolin temple." And so he learned this martial art, 18 Lohan Palm, which is quite rare and And then he started using it as part of his medical practice because it had so many health benefits. So quite interesting, right? Quite interesting. 1996, before he knew Neil, before he even knew that he would know Neil, here's basically all the same details in the preface of a book written by someone besides Chen Qiming himself. Is again, I think, very, very, very good sign in terms of the reliability of this lineage. Anyways, yeah, so that was the exciting development for today. Wow. Yeah, it's astonishing what people uh it's astonishing how long people live in various parts of the world. All right, so on the Discord I put that preface written by Yi Jingguo of Heishan, and I put a little photo of it for people that read Chinese. But that's at the end. That's at the start of this book. Yeah, that's quite exciting, right? Like even though I think, well, yeah, I mean, actually, I'm going to put soon on the website. I'm going to put there's another testimonial. I've been sort of waiting for the right person to come along to give the testimonial, but there's a there's someone who approached me who's a longtime student of Neil's and who was in a really bad accident and basically was told that, you know, well, I don't know how many details I should share because they're a bit personal, but the prognosis wasn't great. And then this person started doing a lot of Lohan practice. I think 3 or 4 or 5 times a week was doing Lohan practice and made a stunningly full recovery from the injuries that they had. And so, of course, they are over the moon about the potential that this system might have, right? Totally over the moon. Um, I mean, another thing for those who are interested, if there are meditation questions, I'll answer those, of course. But until we hit about 9 o'clock, and if there are no questions, I just ramble about what's on my mind. Quite interesting, quite interesting. But there are, from what I have heard, there are three sort of semi-legendary transmissions from the early period of Shaolin monastic life. The first one was called bone muscle tendon changing. So muscle tendon changing is a process of transforming your body in a certain way that makes it really, really perfect for meditation. And then bone marrow washing is another layer of this, which is much more difficult and subtle to do. And then the third one was 18 Lohan Palm. And something that I find really fascinating, and for those who are doing the course, you'll see what I mean, but the opening of the 18 Lohan palm looks more Indian. It looks more like the Hindu sort of yoga systems than a lot of Chinese martial arts, which I find interesting, right? In any case, that could be coincidence. It could be because it's a much older system. But the idea was that Shaolin, in terms of martial arts and the other things they did, grew out of these three main practices. Everything else sort of was generated out of or based upon these three initial practices. And then, of course, as time went on, there are now probably hundreds of different lineages where you learn bone marrow washing and or muscle tendon changing, and they're not all the same, right? That the traditions become very, very diverse. But Lohan palm, very rare to find Lohan palm. Lohan chuan, Lohan fist, common, very common. Lohan palm, very rare. So yeah, this was Neil actually was on a bit of a journey as a young martial arts guy associated with Jingwu back in the day. Was a was very much interested in at some point, right, being able to have all three of the legendary Shaolin arts in his possession, and now he does and has for a long time. But there's an article on that in the course. That's quite interesting. Quite interesting indeed. Okay. Um, yeah. So one of the things that Neil is going to be doing with that material, as you said, Blue Eyes, is he's taking because he's an encyclopedia of Chinese internal arts and Chinese training, sort of health art methods and all of these things. He's like he knows so much. He has said to me on one occasion, you know, when I've pressed him because he doesn't like talking about how much he knows. And when I really pressed him, he says, "You know, the trouble is I've trained in so many things." He said, "I've never had a real job," is the way that he puts it, but it's kind of a funny way to say it, right? He said, "I've never had a real job. I've been a martial arts guy since my earliest professional days, and all I've done is train in this stuff for 40 years." And then he's gone out and collected from the best people in the world he could find the best elements of all of these things so that he could do them and he could teach them. And that's all he's done for 40 years. So he goes, like, if you put it all down on paper, it sounds unbelievable, you know? So he's a little bit embarrassed by how much he knows. But what he wants to do now that he's 50, and maybe if he's lucky, he has, 20 good years and another 20 were like okay years, is to take everything he knows and funnel it through the Lohan system so that all the internal arts he knows and health arts he knows, etc., that he'll funnel it through the way that he teaches the Lohan system. So very precious, I think. I really do hope that a few people at least take it on. And I was talking. He and I were talking with one of our mutual teachers last night about just making sure we do it the right way, so that people are they actually get the transmission, and it's not just like a business or something, because there's a lot of stuff out there that's like that. Uh, Sorry, my friends. One of my teachers just sent me a message, and I need to respond very quickly. Uh, well, think about it like an old school career man. You know what I mean? It used to be relatively common that you would go into your career and you would do one thing and that's what you did. And roughly speaking, I think that's how Neil has lived. He went in, he trained with the best people he could find in Canada. He trained with Jingwu Sports Federation, which is like some of the best Chinese martial arts guys in the world. They're world famous. And so then, as he became a professional and a teacher with Jingwu and taught with them on and off over the years, he also worked security and he did bouncing and he did the traditional thing because he was more or less he was accepted into the sort of traditional Chinese way of teaching and learning, which is a family system. And because it was how to say because of this, there were teachers that normally, let's say at that period of time, especially, early, like late 80s, early 90s, even maybe early 2000s, most of the time it might have been really hard to get an introduction and to train seriously with teachers in these things if you weren't, I mean, in particular, if you're a Western person, right? But he was part of the family lineage for a couple of arts with people that were quite serious and well known. So he could go in and have them send a letter ahead and do all the traditional things, and he would turn up and do all the stuff you're supposed to do. And so these people really taught him stuff. Again, it's almost unfathomable. I mean, somebody should make a movie about him. Seriously. Every time he tells me a story, I'm like, Jesus, that's a whole Hollywood film, you know? Like there's one story that that's on the course in the extracurricular materials, and I'll tell you guys this story, and then we'll do our practices. Uh, because if he smiles, you can see he's missing a few teeth in the front, or he has some chipped teeth and stuff, right? And so he wrote an article years ago, and I found it, and I rewrote it for him and put it on the site. uh, and he talks about how his teeth got all chipped, and his teeth got all chipped because he was in his prime. He was an incredible martial artist. He had was a fighter. He had done a lot of fights. Like, he was a serious guy, and he had heard of a gentleman, Grandmaster Zhu, who is still world famous as an internal martial arts grandmaster, highly capable. And so he called ahead. He did all the normal stuff, and one of the things that would happen in a traditional environment in many cases is you have a polite challenge match where you fight, and you fight for real, but obviously you're not trying to kill each other, right? And you're not angry at each other or anything. It's just part of what you do. And so he goes to Grandmaster Zhu's house. They go to listen to this. They go to the roof of his garage in San Francisco, overlooking whatever, right? But just think of it, standing on the roof of the wise old grandmaster. He's in his 70s, you know. And Neil's, I think, in his mid 30s or late 30s, in his prime, a fighter, and he's going to fight this guy. And so, of course, a little bit of him is like, okay, this is an old man here, and whatever, whatever. But Grandmaster Zhu goes, you like, are you sure you want to fight? And he's like, yeah, I'm sure. And he says, okay. And so he puts his hands up. Neil puts his hands up, and Neil said, for the first time in his entire life as a martial artist, he was on the ground in about a fraction of a second, face down, and there were chips of his teeth flying out of his mouth. But he said that he was overjoyed because he found somebody who knew so much more than he did in a particular area of training. And then, of course, trained with him for years, and Grandmaster Zhu came to visit Neil on a number of occasions. And I think Neil holds one or two of lineages taught by Grandmaster Zhu, including something from Xingyi, and I think also maybe part of a lineage or a full lineage of Tai Chi. So again, Neil has just, like, he's really put himself through a long process of finding the best people who are really capable in all this stuff and doing what they said and learning it and getting their approval to the point where they say, you have this lineage now. You're in the family. So really remarkable. Can't say enough good about the guy. Um, I'm sure he won't be everyone's cup of tea because, he's an old school martial arts guy and isn't afraid of fighting and stuff, you know, but say lovey. Okay. Well, sorry, a bit of a diversion there, but Blue Eyes, in terms of the martial side, which is the first layer, he has it. And then on top of that, sort of underneath that layer, is the internal martial arts side, which is also has some fighting in it. But there's also all these extremely refined principles of how the body connects up, how you send waves through the soft tissue of the body, how you use the elastic elements of the soft tissue in the body to generate forces and so forth, which creates good health at the same time. And then, of course, all the qigong elements, including one of the things that he got from one of his trainings is Shaolin Neijin Gong, which includes Fa Qi, includes the ability to project Qi, which is, you see that a bit, I think, with sort of people that are Qigong, like great Qigong practitioners and so forth, but um, it's much more rare with martial arts people. So then he added all of these things on over time, all of these elements that are in those systems, but usually one person doesn't know all of them. He's done nothing else but collect all these things for years and do them and make himself capable in them. And then eventually it leads down the road to meditation, and then attached to meditation is this other set of trainings called Neigong, which is basically tantra without the tantra. It's tantra without having to take empowerments. So very sophisticated, very, very sophisticated technology, really helpful for training and meditation. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Autism, ADHD, lots of stuff in the chat. Right. Yeah, it's a lot easier as a honeybee if you can go to one patch and it has all of the nectar that you want in one area, you know? I used I used to raise honeybees. I don't know if I ever told you guys that. I used to have two honeybee hives on my a little small farm my wife and I had in the States. Yeah, bees don't just go to one little flower. They want to go to a place where there's a lot of one flower. There has to be a lot of one thing in one place. Otherwise they don't go. Okay, shall we do some practice? Well, this is why I'm saying I think, you know, I again, I hope it doesn't seem too self-serving because again, if people sign up for the course, it also helps me do all of this, blah blah blah. But at the same time, you know, I give away all that information for free anyway. you know, but I am really excited. I'm really excited for people to get into it and make progress. And if you've never done internal arts, yeah, 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 yeah. So just in general, meditation should make your memory better because meditation depends upon the power of your memory. So Daniel, the this term mindfulness is a really 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 bad mistranslation of a Buddhist psychological term sati or smrti, which actually means memory, to remember or to not forget. So training in meditation should make your memory better. And to train in meditation, you need both aspects of memory. According to Western psychology, we have long-term memory and we have working memory, right? So your working memory is actively not forgetting what you're doing in the moment. And then your long-term memory, of course, is recalling information from, I don't know what the cutoff is, but from something like more than 3 minutes ago or more than 10 minutes ago, something like this. Anything, it's actually not that long ago, considering that it's long term. But you have to access memory that's been stored, and you have to be able to access the type of memory that doesn't forget what you're doing in the moment. So this term mindfulness, sati smrti, means memory, to remember or to not forget, and you need both elements in order to be successful in meditation. So if you train in meditation, your memory should improve. Yeah. Okay. Let's do a bit of seated practice. We have 11 people in the room. Daniel, I'm going to do the first type of meditation that I recommend for people today, and I'll describe it with some detail, enough to do sort of a basic level of the practice. But bear in mind that the first thing that will happen when you try to meditate is you'll notice your mind is more out of control than you thought it was. And that's a good sign, not a bad sign. That's a reason to be happy, not a reason to be frustrated. So the struggle actually to get your mind to do what you're telling it to do is the first sign that you're actually training your mind in meditation. Not that your mind has become calm. Your mind's not going to become calm for a while. And this confuses people a lot because much of the discussion of meditation has to do with making your mind calm, making your mind more relaxed, and so on and so forth. That doesn't happen in a stable way until you have some capability to actually control what your mind is doing. And then that comes. But in the beginning, you have to use a lot of force, actually, if you're not in retreat, a lot of force to get your mind to do what you're telling it to do. So I'll be teaching you that technique today, which is a technique that works in real life. It's one that you don't have to be in retreat in order to make it work. So it's quite helpful. Okay, so this practice is only 5 minutes. I learned it from one of my teachers, who was himself, according to two different traditions, a highly accomplished meditator, highly accomplished practitioner. Uh, the reason it's only 5 minutes instead of 10 minutes or half an hour or whatever, even though it's a breath based practice and a lot of those practices last a long time, is that you're going to be using every ounce of energy that you can muster. I mean, and when I say every ounce, I mean every single ounce of energy you can muster to try to keep your mind where you put it. And it will be difficult. It will be difficult. And that's okay. If you're struggling with the mind to make it do what you told it to do, then you're building that skill, or you're strengthening that muscle of being able to pull your mind in and get it to do what you wanted it to do. Okay? So this is a good sign before you get started. So in my book, Blue Eyes, I actually have a whole section on how to learn. Learning how to learn is extremely important, but it's beyond the scope of this particular teaching series. It's a little bit too detailed. Okay, so let's get going. Bobby Jones, if you would go to the Discord, put the link to that in the suggestions for future videos section, and I'll take a look. I'll take a look. Okay, so place the mind on the breath. All right, so when you breathe in naturally through the nose, you'll feel that in some area around the nose, in the nose, on the nostril tip, somewhere, that there's a little bit more sensation than other parts. So place your attention there because it'll be easier to grab onto with your mind. All right. And then between the out breath and the in breath, just count. And you're going to count from 1 to 7, 7 to 0. When you get to 0, you can move your body around a little bit if you need to, but otherwise keep your body completely still. Since it's only 5 minutes, sitting still for 90 seconds at a time is manageable, I hope. All right. So you're going to count from 1 to 7, 7 back down to 0, 3 times, or until I say stop. And one of the key instructions is, because you're building this muscle of grabbing your attention and pulling it in right away and having it do what you told it to do, as soon as I say begin, you want to, with every ounce of you, every bit of energy you can, pull your mind in and place it as tightly and as forcefully as you can on that little tiny patch of skin. Okay? And same thing with the counting. When you count the numbers, don't try to do anything to make your mind blank. Just keep your mind tightly focused on the actual sensations you feel on the skin and the counting. So, in a sense, you could think about it like a movie reel. You're making a movie, right? And you're going to point the camera at the sensations you feel on your nose, just the sensations. You're not imagining anything. So, you have the sensations. Then you turn the camera up for a second and you have one, right? And the one should also be quite forceful. It shouldn't be like one, it should be 1, right? Full intensity, just like the full intensity you're placing here. Okay? So that's enough instruction to get going, I think. Don't worry about your mind being blank. It's not going to be blank. It's going to be a total mess. But struggle with that total mess and try to keep it as much as you can on the sensations here and the counting. All right. So breathing in, find a patch of skin. 3, 2, 1. Full force. Begin. Okay. So one of the key one of the key details with the first technique is, for those of you who are not new, this is not going to be news for you, but if you're just new to meditation, yeah, exactly. You're going to notice that the force of your distractions is way more than you thought. And in the great texts on meditation, they say that your mind is like a wild, drunken elephant. So imagine an elephant that's wandered upon some fermented fruit on the forest floor and gorged themselves and gotten completely drunk and is barreling through the jungle. You know, this is the analogy that's used as to how distractible your mind is and how out of control your mind is. So, this technique, which uses really intense intention, really powerful intention to try to keep your mind somewhere, it shows you really quickly that your mind is trying to jump everywhere, trying to do 10 things you didn't ask it to do. And you told it to be here, and but you're feeling your shoulder instead. You told it to be here, but and to visualize a number, but instead it's visualizing like cartoon characters, or thinking about lunch tomorrow, or it's doing everything but what you told it to do. So in the beginning, in the beginning, the biggest problem you have is distraction. And if you focus on techniques that are really, really powerful antidotes to distraction, then you make progress against distraction relatively quickly. If you work on techniques that aren't that good at dealing with distraction, and then between sessions, you're stirring your mind up because you live in the real world. You don't really have a choice. You go to work, it's stressful. You come home, you need to do something to blow off a little steam. So you do whatever you do. We all have things that we do to blow off steam. So you do those things. And then you have to, maybe you're studying, whatever it is. And then you have relationships. You have your family, your friends, people online that you hang out with, whatever. You have all these relationships you're maintaining that are stirring up your mind. So everything is stirring the mind. When you go into retreat, you spend 5 hours, 10 hours, 16 hours not stirring up the mind. And so almost any technique you want to use after through 2 or 3 days of not stirring up your mind with distraction, almost any technique you want to use will start to work fairly well, as long as it's a real technique and is taught by someone competent, you know? But in the real world, the technique of just sort of relaxing and not stirring your mind and just trying to be calm and blah, 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 it doesn't work very well because you're stirring your mind up in between over and over again. Not unlike retreat, where you're not doing that. In retreat, obviously, you're just not stirring your mind up in between. You're doing a lot of practice and you're keeping your mind very calm all the time. So this is why there's a difference in the techniques that work in real life versus the ones that work in retreat. Now, of course, if you spent uh 2 years in retreat, then the questions and answers become a bit different uh, than than uh than the ones that I'm asking and answering, right? But for all of us who live here in the real world and we don't do 10 hours of meditation a day, you need something with a lot of force to meet the force of these distractions, or just nothing will happen. And years can go by like this if you're stubborn and you keep trying to do it with the wrong techniques over and over. If you're stubborn, you'll spend years wasting time. So the way that I teach, Daniel, and those of you who are here, you start with this technique that has a great force. Then, once you have some ability to grab your mind and get it to do what you want, then you can use other techniques that make the mind more calm really quickly. Then you want to, as fast as you can, you want to move from there to being able to take more and more of your practice off the cushion. If you can get more and more of your practice off the cushion, then think about it like this. In the morning, if this is the quality of your mind, you do some meditation, and now your mind, let's put it up here for the sake of just being able to see it. Now your mind has this quality. And pretty quickly thereafter, you're right back to the real world because, the mind gets stirred right back up pretty quickly, right? Now, on the other hand, if you have a technique that gets the mind to hear pretty quickly within, let's call it 15 minutes, the mind is in pretty good quality. And then you have other techniques that off the cushion, you're standing up, you're walking around, you're talking to people, and the quality of mind is sort of going like this throughout the day instead of going bang right back down to normal and then you're down here throughout the day. Now the mind's sort of trickling down throughout the day. And by the time you get to the evening session, maybe you bring it back up. And now this is the new baseline. Now you're always at this level because you're transforming this thing. You're transforming your mind. You're making it different than it was permanently. You're not how to say, it's not just like a dose of a medication where when it wears off, you're right back to normal. But it can be. I generally, hey, sweet and sour. Hello, hello, hello. Everybody who's doing Lohan in particular, give a big thank you to Sweet and Sour. She helped track down the book. So now we have Dr. Chen Qiming's book, and she shipped it here at her own expense, despite my protests. So now we have the book. She found it. She sent it here. It's due to her kindness that anybody who benefits from this information is due to her kindness now. So give her a big thank you. Thank you, thank you. So Daniel, in regards to how much do you do for how long, this is a think about meditation skills as a tool belt. You're building tools for working with yourself forever. So the tool of being able to grab your attention and put it where you want is a tool. In the beginning, it's a skill you don't have at all, right? You just can't do it. But eventually, it's a tool you have so that when you need to grab your mind and get it to do what you're trying to tell it to do, you grab you grab it and it comes. I did this the other day. My dog isn't in the room, but like when a dog is not well trained, he won't come when you call him. He won't lay down when you tell him to. He won't stand up when you tell him to. He won't stop chewing on something when you tell him to, right? One of the words that's used in the meditation training text is a tamed mind. Tame, right? And it's a little funny. I don't think people think about this enough, but it's having a mind that will sit down when you tell it to and stand up when you tell it to and stop talking when you tell it to and start talking when you tell it to. Stop thinking when you tell it to, start thinking when you tell it to. It's like it's now a tamed creature. Right? So this is a technique that you would basically do forever. You'd probably do for the rest of your life. It's a tool you have now when your mind is not doing what you're telling it to do, that you can make it come when you call it. So that's one aspect. The other aspect is if you were training with me a little bit more formally, one of the moderators can put the little link in the chat. I'm happy to train you without you going to the course or anything, but if you want to train a bit more serious, I have a community where people are training with me a bit more seriously, and that's a nice way. If you wanted to provide some financial support to what we're doing too, that's a good way to do it. But I teach all the same information for free, so it's not required. Um, the first technique, I usually say, depends on you, but probably somewhere between a month and 2 months, where you're just getting the mind finally for the first time in your life that when you call it, it comes, and then it's and you tell it to sit down, and it sits down for 5 minutes, right? And most of that 5 minutes, it stays where you put it. And if you can do that within a month or two, then the next technique will be much more effective. You could start the second technique right away if you wanted, which is a body scanning practice that I teach that makes the mind very calm, but it won't be as effective as it would be if your mind goes where you told it to go when you tell it to go there, and mostly stays where you told it to stay in the first place. Does that make sense? If you tried to place your mind in your hand and it ends up in your shoulder, or you try to put it in the shoulder and it ends up in the hand, then your body scanning, it'll still give you some benefits, but it's not going to be as much. Or you tell it to go to the hand and you feel the whole arm instead of just the hand. So you're also learning with the first technique, you're learning how to pool your awareness. Your awareness is a bit like Wi-Fi bandwidth. I tell most of my students, uh, you're streaming HD 6 HD services right now: mental image, visual image, auditory, smell, taste, and touch. When you do the first technique, ideally, and of course, I'm not even going to say that it happens this way for me every day, On a really good day, it might happen this way. But ideally, you take all of the bandwidth from the other five senses and you take all the bandwidth from the rest of tactile awareness, all of it, and it goes right there to that patch of skin where you put the attention. And the only other thing that it does is it counts. And that's it, right? All of the bandwidth of the awareness is pooled, concentrated in one place. Does that make sense? So that's what you're attempting to do. And that's why it needs so much force, because probably today you didn't have your hearing turn off. Probably today you didn't have your vision turn off. It probably didn't even get gray, or much less sort of like really dark, right? You probably felt the entirety of the rest of your body, and it was quite distracting while you were trying to do this, on top of seeing other mental images that you didn't tell your mind to create. So the force of your distraction is really powerful. So this first technique is teaching you how to pool your awareness as much as you can, pulling it in, pulling it in, pulling it in until it's like like a diamond, like it's all of it's been concentrated from this charcoal into a little attentional diamond, right? And then you're going to take the ability to pool your awareness in one place, and then you're going to scan the body using that same quality of pooling the awareness. But now you're going to scan the body with that pooled awareness. I pull it here, then I pull it here, then I pull it here, and so on and so forth. You see? And that's much more powerful than if your mind is spread out all over the place and you try to put 10% of it here in your hand. If you can get 80% of it in your hand, that's much better than being able to get 10% here in kind of body scanning. Does that make sense? So, second technique, body scanning, because it makes the mind so calm so quickly. Third technique, you'll like this as a Drukpa Kagyu person, Mahamudra. Mahamudra, and taught in such a way that I break it down into enough pieces that you can get each piece working independently, and then you can start combining the pieces. And then you could, of course, if you're Drukpa Kagyu, you can then take your Mahamudra skills back into your lineage for sure. And then the final one that I teach is rumination. So is learning, yeah, Naropa. Well, Tilopa. Tilopa would be the originator. But it was right, wasn't it? Tilopa to Naropa to who was next? I can't remember. Naropa to Ampopa is way down the line. That's not right. Milarepa was before Gampopa, before Milarepa was Marpa. And then Marpa was in India. Well, in any case, so um, this is the idea. Then there's rumination meditation. So rumination meditation, yeah, Milarepa goes back to Marpa, but then Marpa he trained with a bunch of people in India, and I think isn't that where he got his Mahamudra teachings? Was through some of his teachers or one of his teachers in India. I'm pretty sure Marpa the translator, who by the way was a layperson, and he had 7 wives and a bunch of kids, and he was rich. He had a bunch of land, which means that you can do it too, my friends. You can do it too. Oh, and I was having a great conversation with somebody. For some reason, money keeps coming up with people. Think about think about Marpa, right? Marpa, the teacher of the great Milarepa, who everyone knows. If you've been around Tibetan Buddhism, everyone knows Milarepa, the great retreat dwelling yogi. His teacher, Marpa, was unbelievable practitioner, was a layperson, was rich, married with a bunch of kids. He took it upon himself to travel to India, train with some of the great yogis, learned, if I'm not mistaken, he learned Sanskrit, and then he brought materials back with him, and he translated those and made them available to the Tibetans. The again, this is only whatever, a few hundred years ago. That there are a lot of examples throughout Buddhist history where lay people accomplished incredible things. It goes all the way back to the Buddha's time. Okay, so Blue Eyes, sorry to leave you hanging for so long. I wanted to tie a bow on that discussion. Thank you for the donation. So Robert Wright. So I haven't read Why Buddhism is True, but I've read excerpts, and the key excerpts that I've read. What, from Marpa? You can't find Marpa's wives? That's probably a good thing, my friend. You don't want to be finding other people's wives. Okay. I put the link in the chat for you. And this link says 9 wives. Yeah, you don't want to be finding other people's wives. It's not a good thing. Okay, so his main wife. Okay. Let's not talk too much about it. People will get scared. Okay. Uh, so I've read some excerpts from his book, and I've watched some of his public talks and so forth. And the key arguments that he makes, I don't think work. They're just his personal feelings. Like, for example, he says, "Well, karma seems too sort of, how to say, what was the word he used? That basically it's fulfilling some kind of psychological need that people might have to believe in karma and need there to be justice and retribution in the world and in the universe, and they need things to turn out right." And he says that sort of psychological approach to the world feels antithetical to the Buddha's teachings to him. Okay, no problem. I mean, every single Buddhist source on the planet prior to 1960 says the Buddha taught karma as a literal fact about how things work. But sure, if you feel like it's wrong, no problem. If you feel like it couldn't be something he taught, good on you. you know, it's not an argument, it's just a feeling. So there's, if you read his arguments, I don't think they have any teeth. They're just not very strong arguments. And if you go and you check up on the sources and things, I guarantee you're going to find that, because there's a lot of people who have made these kinds of arguments. And if you just go read the sources, you go, yeah, it's not like that. I'll give you another example. When I was doing my PhD, there's a source that one of my professors made me read, because I had argued that, for example, according to Buddhism, plants don't have consciousness. And this is a point that was debated between the Buddhists and the Jains, and the Buddha was very clear that plants are not a realm of rebirth. However, plants do, according to some sources, I think Abhidharma sources, they have some qualities that are similar to conscious beings. In other words, they look like or mimic conscious beings in some respects. But they're not listed among the realms of rebirth, because conscious beings don't, with any regularity, take rebirth basically with their body being a plant. There are very rare cases where, because someone has super weird karma, they take rebirth as all sorts of things that are unusual, like being reborn with their mind stuck in a pillar or in a wall or in a plant or whatever. But this isn't considered to be a realm of rebirth. It's considered to be sort of a weird edge case that sometimes happens to some people. It's not a normal destination. So I was making this point, which I thought was pretty uncontroversial, and then I realized there was a guy who's written like 2 books on the fact that he thinks the Buddha did teach that you can be reborn as a plant. And when I looked up the sources he used, none of the sources say that. The example he used is that devas sometimes have residences or houses inside trees. Absolutely nowhere in the canon does it say that a deva's body is a tree. Absolutely nowhere in the canon does it say you can be reborn as a deva that is a tree or has a tree as a body. Nowhere in the canon does it say this. Nowhere in the canon does it imply this. It does say, however, that some devas have residences that are more or less, you could say, in a virtual space coexistent with that tree. Inside that tree, inside that rock, is a virtual space unaccessible to the physical world in the normal sense. That devas sometimes take up residence in places like this. But they also take up residence, for example, there's a really famous case where some devas took up residence in the gatehouse for Anathapindika, who was the Buddha's chief lay disciple, lay student. And because so many monks were coming and going, every time monks came and went, the devas would have to leave their home because they couldn't be above where the monks were when the monks came in or the nuns came in, because this is part of the rules of being a deva, I guess. Some, is at least the idea. And so these devas got themselves into big trouble because they tried to convince Anathapindika uh, that he should, I think that basically that he should stop having all these monks and nuns come over so that they wouldn't have to leave their house anymore. And they got in big trouble with all the other deities for doing this. Anyways, the pillar, the gatehouse wasn't their body. It was just a place they were hanging out. Likewise. Anyways, long story short, none of this stuff. Okay, yeah, sweet and sour. That's another interesting point. Devas can cause themselves to appear as all sorts of things. So can Buddhas, so can bodhisattvas. They can cause themselves to appear as all sorts of things, according to the canon. But that's quite different than saying, if you die, you're going to be reborn as a tulip. It doesn't say that anywhere. It's just not in the canon. It's not a thing. So, anyways, long story short, with a lot of these guys that do this kind of thing, as you're describing, Blue Eyes, if you just go to the sources and you read them, and then you go to the earliest commentarial sources and you read those, you find out that it doesn't work. It's fine for you personally to say, I don't like the idea of karma. I don't like the idea of rebirth. I don't like the idea of realms of rebirth. Doesn't make sense to me. What's not okay is to lie and say it's not in there, which is what a lot of secular Buddhists do, by the way. They go, oh, yeah, the Buddha never taught that. That came later. No, it didn't. Every early source, the Four Noble Truths, the 12 links have karma, literal rebirth in the first teaching. It's in the first teaching. My goodness. Anyways, long story short, the arguments just don't work. If you want to say, as a secular Buddhist, I don't like all of that, it doesn't make sense to me, no problem. But if you want to say, as a secular Buddhist, there's no faith in Buddhism, that's not something we do. There's no worship in Buddhism, that's not something we do. There's no karma and rebirth in Buddhism, that's not something we do. There's no monasticism in Buddhism, that's not something we do. These guys, every tradition of Buddhism up until 1960 just got it wrong, and they're all screwing it up. And we smart Western secular people, we're getting it right for the first time in Buddhist history ever. No, no, you're lying, or you don't know the sources. Let me put it in another term, in just one more term, and then I'll drop it. I don't know a singular secular academic of Buddhism. Let me repeat this. I don't know a single secular academic of Buddhism who's in the academy teaching Buddhism who would say that faith is not part of Buddhism, worship is not part of Buddhism, that monasticism is not part of Buddhism, that karma and rebirth and realms of rebirth in a literal way are not part of Buddhism. I don't know anyone who would say this, because if you read the sources, that's what they say. This is what's in the sources. It's not like some supposedly weird later tantric thing. It's not some supposedly weird later Mahayana thing. It is in the archaeological record, in the earliest sources we have, it's all there. And every time we've discovered a new corpus, like the Gandharan corpus of texts, we find it all there too. So everywhere that Buddhism has gone, every archaeological record we can get from any time period of Buddhism going back to the 2nd century, and all the commentarial traditions of Buddhism up until about at least 1920, maybe 1960, all agree on all of this. The secularists are lying or they're wrong. I'm totally fine, actually, with people saying, hey, I love everything about Buddhism except for the fact that it has faith and worship and monasticism and karma and rebirth. I don't like that. I like the rest of it. No problem. Go for it. You know, have at it. Do all the rest of it. Fantastic. Because if you're right and we all die and we turn into dirt, it doesn't matter anyway. If it turns out that I'm right, it's fantastic that you did at least that much, because karma is going to come around and help you out next time. You know? So if you're right about all this, we become dirt and it doesn't matter what either one of us did, because eventually the universe is going to go out of existence and literally every single thing every one of us has done will cease to exist and will have amounted to absolutely nothing. I mean, zero. Not a speck of what we did will be significant. It can't be. You can fake it in your head as much as you want that it's all meaningful and blah 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 blah. But if the universe is coming to an end at some point, every single thing we did becomes meaningless unless there's some aspect of us as individuals, as we're speaking of now in terms of karma, rebirth, afterlife, blah blah blah, that carries on. If it all just becomes space dust, for lack of a better term, and then crunches into non-existence and explodes into a new universe, or gets pulled apart by dark energy and dark matter, the expansion, blah blah blah, whatever, and you have cold death or heat death of the universe. If it all goes away, all of this from a physicalist perspective has to be meaningless. Period. There can't be a meaningful universe in that circumstance. So if the secularists are right, none of this actually matters except for like I kind of don't want my life to suck while I'm around, right? Like that's and if I can help some other people too and have their life not suck, awesome, because that also feels good for me. Why not? Right? That's the secular approach. And if you think the rest of it is bullshit, if they're right about that, then no problem. You know, when we all die, we become nothing. No problem. You know, I did my bit, you did your bit. If it turns out that I'm right, it's better that you did the secular Buddhist thing without lying about the Buddhist history because all this lying you're doing about Buddhist history has karmic consequences that are really bad. So you shouldn't do that. I mean, just in general, you probably shouldn't lie about Buddhist history, just to be intellectually honest, even as a secular person. But a responsible secular Buddhist position would be, you know what? In the canon, they say that faith is a really good thing. I think, for me, I don't. That makes me feel uncomfortable. I don't want to do that. They say worship is one of the best things you can do. That makes me really uncomfortable as a secular person. I don't want to do that. They say that monasticism is a really great thing. I don't think people should give up their families and all this. That's not something I'm going to do. Probably I wouldn't encourage other people to do it either, but I do understand it's part of the Buddhist tradition from a traditional standpoint. Karma and rebirth and realms of rebirth definitely described in the canon as real things, but for me that seems, old and traditional and whatever. It's not for me as a secular modern person, you know. I'll leave that to the religious Buddhists. I'm going to be a secular Buddhist. No problem. No problem. What's not okay as an intellectual, as an academic, as a practitioner is to say you don't find karma, rebirth, realms of rebirth literally in the canon. Yeah, you do. You don't find worship and reverence and prostration and the veneration of higher beings in the canon. Yeah, you do. You don't find the people from the earliest stages entering into monastic life and becoming renunciates. Yeah, you do. All of that is there, you know? So long story short, people like Robert Wright, who basically say, for one reason or another, they don't think it's possible that the Buddha taught all of this. Well, there's no evidence that he didn't teach it. All the evidence points the other direction. And anybody that looks at this seriously, from at least from my experience as an academic, even the secular academics would agree, all this stuff is there. There's what's his name? Alex O'Connor has a really funny expression he's been trying to get going for years, throwing the baby out with the holy water. So not just the bath water, but the holy water, you know? That people are trying to get rid of all the stuff that seems too religious, too holy somehow. But then they end up throwing away all of this stuff that's actually really good for humanity in the process. And that's another issue, a related issue, but separate issue that needs to be addressed. In the secular community, there's a lot of stuff that I think is getting thrown out from the religious side, so to speak, that makes all of this stuff not work as well as it could. How do I know? Look at the journals studying modern mindfulness, modern meditation, blah blah blah, and you'll see that the results are mixed for people. And in particular, people that are training in a lot of meditation without teachers, they have problems. Not all of them, but a lot of them. And people who are training in a fair amount of meditation without lineage, a bunch of them are developing bigger egos, more arrogance, because they don't have all the other teachings there that make the arrogance and so forth go away. Yeah. Yeah. 1950s, 60s, up until about, I don't know, maybe the early 2000s, there was a movement that started in academia, um, Orientalism, and the Orientalists liked Buddhism because they wanted it, desperately wanted it to be religion without religion. They wanted it to be religion without religion. They wanted it to be just a philosophy. They wanted it to be a way of doing religion and all the stuff that's important in religion without actually having to do a religion. But it's not, and it never has been. There's a bunch of stuff in it you could take out and say, I want to do this part. I want to do the meditation part, which is actually how I teach meditation. you know, because Buddhism says meditation isn't Buddhist. Buddhism says meditation is a thing that any human being can do. Great. Well, let's teach more human beings how to actually do it because that'll help a lot of people. Uh, so, meditation is something that you can extract. Some of the ethics don't depend on being Buddhist, some of them are just common sense applied at a much higher level where you're learning how to take observation of the real world and observation of yourself, and you're learning how to generate new emotions, what I call rumination meditation, positive rumination, right? You're learning how to create new positive internal states on purpose and then have those be your normal instead of all of the nonsense that you normally have, all the arrogance, all the anger, all the frustration, all the weakness of willpower and so forth, transforming that into strong will, humility, compassion, love, so that you become a much more capable person who also has more virtue, even from a secular standpoint, that you've become a more virtuous person in terms of the types of motivations and emotions and so forth that you have. So, like this, I think too much has been thrown out and not enough has been understood to really make it work as well as it could, even if you were being secular. Because some of you who've been around for a couple months with me now, you know, I can go way down the rabbit hole on the religious side, and I have good reasons, I think, for being a religious Buddhist. And at the same time, I can teach the meditation stuff without even talking about Buddhism for 2 seconds, because it's not about Buddhism. It's about how your mind works, you know? And understanding how your mind works will make you better at Buddhism. Okay. Daniel, in Tibetan Buddhism, they have this meditation where you visualize your deity, but some say you can't do that without initiation. Okay, so Daniel, I don't know how long you've been doing Karma Kagyu, or uh, it's not Karma Kagyu, sorry, but how long you've been doing the Kagyu you've been doing. There are some self-generation practices where you don't need empowerment. For example, I think visualizing yourself as Shakyamuni Buddha, if I'm not mistaken, you don't have to have empowerment for, but there's like sadhanas and things for it that they're like on the edge of tantric practice. And then visualizing deities in front of you, generally speaking, where you're not self-generating, generally speaking, those are all okay. Um, although certain deities, because if you don't understand the symbolism that of that deity, they're not very attractive. Let's say, they're meant to be intimidating. They're meant to be scary. They're meant to give you more force and power in terms of how you deal with difficulty and so forth. And those techniques are hard. They're. Oh, I didn't realize you were from Ladakh. Wow. Well, someone, if you could put the Discord in the chat again, just reach out to me. Reach out to me, Daniel. Reach out to me on Discord if you could, or Facebook, whichever is more convenient, so we can talk some more privately too. That'd be good because I don't want to replace your lineage. This is an important thing. I'm not replacing anyone's lineage. I want you to be a fantastic Kagyu practitioner. You know what I mean? I want to do what I can as an older brother to help you relate to mom and dad even better than you ever have before, as best I can. Since I've been around for a little while, I want to help you take the most out of what you're already doing instead of replacing what you're doing. Okay. So Blue Eyes asks about Psychedelics. Interesting. A lot of people have been asking me about psychedelics recently. Uh, my opinion is this: if in 15 years psychedelics with certain dosages purified down to whatever the active ingredients are, blah blah blah, are something that you could go to your psychotherapist and do with a certain dose aimed at creating a specific medical effect because you have a specific problem that they're trying to solve, no problem. As long as you're not abusing that medication, which it will be at that time, right? It will be an actual medication. As long as you're not abusing it, no problem. It's not a problem in terms of your vows. It's not a problem in terms of anything. The Buddha said you can take whatever medicines are there if you have problems that you need to solve with medicine. But right now, the danger is, let's say that, um, okay, so in the Vinaya, when it's talking about the vow against intoxicants, the example that's given, because each Vinaya rule, generally speaking, each Vinaya rule has a story that comes along with it. The story that comes along with the no intoxicants rule is a young monk who didn't try alcohol before he took his vows. And he dips a blade of grass into alcohol and he puts a single drop on his tongue. And the Buddha kicks him out of the Sangha. Okay? So, one way to interpret this is like this: there are other cases where people take medicines that have alcohol in them. So, why didn't they get kicked out of the Sangha? Because not meditation, medicine have side effects. And this is a known thing, some psychological side effects, some physical side effects. If you need to cure an illness and your intent has nothing to do with trying to get these side effects, if your intent is solely that you want to cure your illness and you know that you're going to have to deal with these side effects in the meantime, and that you are definitely not going to abuse the medication in order to have more side effects, right? You following me? That it's okay, whatever substances you needed to take to cure your illness are fine because you're not trying to create a bunch of side effects on purpose. You're just trying to cure your illness. So if your medication makes you less heedless, which is the big problem with intoxicants, that they make you heedless. In other words, you don't have the same moral framework you would normally have. You don't have the same discernment you would normally have. You don't have the same ability to control your mind and behavior you normally would have. So this is heedlessness. It's a non-virtuous mental state. It's non-virtuous by nature. So if you take a substance because you want the mind to be heedless, that is a complete karma that breaks your vow related to intoxicants, breaks it, which is why a single drop, I'm going to take this alcohol to taste the alcohol and see what a little bit of intoxication is like. That's why that breaks the vow. Even though it's a single drop, he wants to become intoxicated a little bit to see what it's like. But the vow is don't take stuff to make your mind heedless. Don't take substances to make your mind heedless. If you take a psychoactive substance like mushrooms or whatever in a medical setting to cure an illness, then you're not sitting there going, I want to have all of these side effects. This is my main goal. I want my mind to be totally fucked up and different than it normally is. That's what I want. This breaks your vows if you hold vows. This takes your vow. This is what messes up your vows, right? This is what karmically is really bad. There's actually a source, since I have it pulled up. Sorry, new people, don't read this if you're new. This will just scare you. But I mean, I literally had this pulled up because I've been having this conversation with 2 days. Ironically, been having this conversation for 2 days with someone. Uh, okay. So here it is. If oh man, I always forget. There's just it lets you do almost no characters. So this is in the suttas. I'll just put the first bit here because we'll be here all night if I try to put the whole thing. Anyway, so that's the first part of the sutra where the Buddha is talking about the karmic results of taking intoxicants. The reason the vow exists is not because the Buddha was some kind of weird prude or something. It's because it creates extremely negative results that are unpleasant that you don't want. So I'll put the link for the sutra. You can look it up and read the rest if you'd like. The Buddha basically says, look, if you take substances to fuck your mind up, the karma of that, regardless of the short-term benefit, okay? Here's the analogy, if you're ready. If I hope everyone doesn't think I'm like some heartless weird person for saying this, but think about it like this, okay? Isn't it true, you tell me, isn't it true that you as a person could go sign up for the military in your country, you could get deployed somewhere, you could narrowly survive with your life, kill a bunch of people that are the enemies of your country, and then get a lot of money because you get a raise, you get medals, you get respect. People invite you on their podcasts to talk about killing people and how awesome you were in battle. Isn't this true? Isn't it true that if you perform well as a soldier, that other people will respect you, generally speaking, that probably there's more opportunities for money and fame and all this good stuff? Isn't that true? I mean, if it's not true, tell me it's not true. In general, that's true. If you go into battle and you survive, especially if it's an important mission for your country and you kill a bunch of people, you get respect, you get medals, you get money, you get promotions, right? Does that mean it's not breaking your vows related to killing if you were a Buddhist? Does it mean you're not breaking your vows against killing as a Buddhist because immediately you're going to get benefits from doing it? No, it doesn't mean that. Those are unrelated subjects. Well, Jonathan, we can come back to coffee and tobacco. Uh, okay. Again, I don't want to get into the politics of soldiering, right? But the point is that non-virtue in terms of karma can produce temporarily in this life benefits. So the Buddha is saying, you know what? Lying could make you more money. Lying could get you more stuff you want. Killing could make you respected. Killing could get you lots of money. Killing could get you, status. Killing, in some cases, if you were really good at it and clever, maybe you'd get your inheritance more quickly. you know. Again, hopefully nobody does this, right? Don't do this, obviously. But the point is that non-virtue can create all sorts of beneficial effects for you. The Buddha says this. He says, of course. If you cheat on your romantic partner and there's like a really beautiful, really handsome person and you really get along with this person, you're cheating with them, a lot of people think like this. They go, well, if I don't get caught, it's just more good stuff for me. Right? Right. Likewise. Are you ready for me to land the plane? Likewise. I say this from the bottom of my heart. It doesn't fucking matter if you became 100 times better by taking a fucking mushroom. It doesn't matter if you became 1,000 times more than you are by taking a mushroom. It's breaking your fucking vow. And the karma, according to the Buddha, is incredibly negative and results in unbelievable suffering, even if you don't have the fucking vow. And if you have the vow and you're breaking the vow, now you're massively in trouble, unbelievably worse off, because You're breaking the vow. You're lying to a Buddha. You took a vow to a Buddha, a being who has infinite good qualities, and you're going, yeah, but I want these temporary benefits that I get from taking this substance. So fuck my vow. Sorry. Some guy over here from the University of whatever says mushrooms are good. So I don't care what the Buddha says about the karmic situation. The Buddha says all of your non virtues have the potential to create huge amounts of benefit for you in this lifetime. If you lie, if you cheat, if you steal, if you whatever, if you sell weapons that kill thousands of people and you get really good at selling weapons, if you get really good at selling weapons that kill a lot of people really good, you'll make millions of dollars, billions of dollars. The karma is absolutely horrific, but you're going to be well off for this life. The Buddha said, don't take intoxicants, not because there's not going to be temporary benefits you could get from intoxicants. Maybe 2 glasses of wine at the end of the day does leave you with better heart health. Maybe smoking weed does reduce your pain and do this and do that, and it's better than these other things. Maybe all that's true. Maybe taking hallucinogens does make you more creative. Maybe taking hallucinogens does lead to more new neural connections in your head. Maybe all that's true. No problem. You're still breaking your vows if you do those things and you're doing it for more than a medical purpose. If you're doing it to fuck your mind up for a period of time because you think it's going to give you spiritual insights, or you think it's going to give you all sorts of interesting things, or you think it's going to advance your practice, that's breaking your vows. And the heedlessness that you're creating, the negative mental factor of heedlessness, is a karmic cause that leads to your mind out of control being heedless when you don't want it to, including, according to the Buddha, getting born repeatedly in various types of hell realms where the mind and body and environment are heedless, and then getting reborn as animals where your mind and body are heedless and out of control, and then being born as human beings where your mind and body are out of control in ways that you don't want them to be out of control. That's the karmic result. But just like killing in this lifetime, if you're a successful soldier or you're really good at making weapons that kill people really well, you can make tons of money, have tons of respect, blah, 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 blah. But all of that killing, the karma is bad. And if you have the intent to take a substance to fuck your mind up, change your ethical palette, change your discernment, change your decision-making process while on the substance, that heedlessness, that negative mental factor is a complete action. I want my mind to be like this. I'm going to take this substance so that my mind will be like this. That action is now complete. The karma is now complete. As soon as you've taken the substance and the mind has become like this, that karma is now complete. And that karma is now waiting like a brick you've thrown in the air to come back down and hit you on the head. It's going to hit you on the head some point. So this is why the vow is there. The vow's not there to try to religiously control you or something. The vow is there because the karma is bad. However, let me wind it back. Let me wind it back. If you don't have the vows, the karma is not as bad because you didn't promise someone not to do it. It's still not good, obviously, but the karma is not as bad. If you have the vows, it's really bad. If you're doing it for a medical purpose only, that a doctor has come to you and said, you know what, you have manic depression, or you have PTSD, or you have this or that, or you have low grade whatever, or you have neural degeneration, whatever. And what I would recommend based upon clinical trials of all of these people is I'm going to give you a specific dose of this under supervision, and you're going to come in, and for 4 hours in the office, you're going to be under supervision. You're going to do this thing. And the reason you're taking the substance is not to create the side effect, which is heedlessness and altered perception of stuff. You're not doing it for that. You're doing it because you want the medical effect, which is coming after that side effect wears off. And now it doesn't break your vows. And now it doesn't create the negative karma because the intent was never to get the side effect. The intent was to get the medical effect that comes after all this weird stuff that happens when you take hallucinogens. So there is a pathway through medicine where I think hallucinogens are fine, even if you're holding vows. But that's probably 10 or 15 years in the future. And for anybody, for goodness sake, because I know I'm in a minority on this issue, I know I am, because the world is getting weird and we live in degenerate times. But go read the sources for yourself about why the vows are there, like the one I put up from 84,000. You can also read from the Pali Canon, the Vibhanga. If I can find it, I'll pop it in the chat. I definitely can because I just put it up for somebody else. Uh, Alcohol. No, Vinaya. Yep. Okay. Uh, so read the section on intoxicants. Here's the Polycanon one for everyone who thinks, oh, well, this is just some weird Mahayana thing, or this guy doesn't know what he's doing. Whatever. I gave you a poly source, an authoritative poly source right here, Vinaya, from the Polycanon, Pali tradition, Vibhanga, commentary on the Vinaya. This is. There are other substances. Yeah, there are a few. Okay, so look, if you read the sutra that I sent over, the Buddha is very explicit about what happens if you're making the mind heedless on purpose by taking substances. The example he uses is alcohol, but that has been what did the Buddha say about foul language? What the Buddha says about foul language, about harsh language, is that it has to be in the right season. That if you have to say something harshly, try to do it at the right time so that you help the person you're using that kind of harshness with. Okay, I do have to get going, but let me answer both Jonathan's question and Yeze's question. So the reason, generally speaking, that tobacco and caffeine are not considered to be intoxicants is because an intoxicant, by definition, according to the ethics we're describing here, needs to be something that creates the mental factor of heedlessness. Heedlessness is a mental state in which you don't have the normal moral decision making that you would, and that you are liable, therefore, to make ethical decisions you wouldn't normally make. So, for example, if you're hallucinating that the person in front of you is apple pie and you cut off their head because you didn't know any better, your mind has become heedless. I hope you'll agree that the normal ethical decision making you would normally have would not be to cut off someone's head because you think it's apple pie, right? This is not something you would normally do. The mind, the mental state is no longer amenable to the same ethical framework you would be keeping the mind in, right? So likewise, if the mind is becoming way less discerning by taking that substance. And there's another element I can't remember. But heedlessness has this sort of confluence of factors where it stops you from thinking and having the ethical decision making and discernment you would normally have. When you drink a cup of coffee, it doesn't do that. When you smoke a cigarette, it doesn't do that. There may be other reasons not to smoke cigarettes, but it for health reasons or whatever, but smoking a cigarette doesn't make you heedless. Smoking a cigar doesn't make you heedless. Eating a candy, unless you eat huge amounts of candy, doesn't make you heedless. But smoking like 3 puffs of a joint will change your discernment a lot, makes your discernment way less. Taking a high enough dose of a hallucinogen, yeah, you're trying to keep your mind sharp and discerning and have the normal moral framework you would normally have be in place so that you don't make weird moral decisions you wouldn't normally make. This is basically it. I mean, you hit it on the head. The resource, you have 5 aggregates, says the Buddha. For those who are still here, and this will be the last thing. You have 5 aggregates, right? This is actually really weird. The more that you think about the fact that you have 5 aggregates. Why? Because mainly you have a body and you have a mind and you have things that aren't the body and mind that are part of what make you up, right? So actually you only have 3 things. So why did the Buddha add 2 more? He said you have form, so that's the body, basically. He said you have consciousness at the end of the road. Okay, that's one of the 3 that I mentioned. You have non-associated compositional factors. That's the stuff that isn't the body and mind, but is somehow associated with the body and mind or associated with how you exist. So why did the Buddha include 2 more things? That's weird. And what are those 2 other things? Feeling and discernment. Feeling means that your sensory perceptions can be pleasant, neutral, or unpleasant. Why would he include that when you have 41 other mental factors? Why would he pull randomly actually 2 of your mental factors out of all the other ones, right? And mention this one, feeling? That's weird. Likewise, discernment is just another mental factor. Why did he pull that out of 41 other mental factors described in Buddhism and put it amongst the 5 things that make you up as a being? That's really strange. He already mentioned consciousness, which is where all the other mental factors are being listed, or non-associated compositional factors, where all the other mental factors are being listed, somewhere between these 2. Why didn't he put those 2 in there with the other ones? Because of this reason. If you're an ordinary being, most of your life will be lived because your senses, you taste chocolate ice cream and you go, oh, this one's really pleasant. Then you taste the strawberry ice cream and you go, strawberry is not for me. And then the rest of your life you eat you eat chocolate ice cream and you avoid strawberry ice cream. So for most ordinary beings, by way of analogy, I hope you can understand, they live their entire life, roughly speaking, based upon the preferences that come through the types of sensations they feel and whether or not they find them to be pleasant, neutral, or unpleasant. This is what drives all their behaviors. And whether or not you find things pleasant, neutral, or unpleasant comes from previous karma, which is why you're just living out your karmic path. You're just living out your karma from the past if all you're doing is following around the pleasant, neutral, and unpleasant feelings coming from the senses. So this is how most beings end up stuck forever in samsara, stuck forever in suffering, because they're just following the karmic patterns from the past. And it's a cycle. And it doesn't have to stop. It's been happening forever. It can happen forever. So what about discernment? Why is discernment there? Because discernment is the thing that gets you out of the problem. Discernment is mentioned out of 41 other things making up your mental processes because it's the thing that gets you out of this mess. What is discernment? Being able to notice the fine distinctions between things. So that you can discern, you can notice for the first time all of these little subtle details of your experience of reality, etc., that point out to you that actually pleasure and chasing pleasurable sensation, for example, that can't lead to happiness. Even though I have this strong habit taking me that direction, it can't do that. And running away from unpleasant sensation by itself, although I'm not saying you should just go out and do more painful stuff, right? I'm not saying that. But simply running away from painful stuff and unpleasant stuff you don't like doesn't make you happy either. We know this. If anyone's ever been unemployed for like 6 months, at first you spend a couple months and you're like, man, this is actually kind of cool. As long as you have enough money and you're not too bad off, right? You go, this is kind of cool. I can do what I want when I want. I can wander around this and that. And then probably around like especially like month 3, 4, 5, you start going, man, I wish I had something to do. This is depressing as hell. I have no purpose. I have no meaning. I have no, you know, no way to establish habits. So simply running from discomfort and simply running towards comfort and pleasure doesn't lead to happiness. You need discernment to see all of this. So why are intoxicants karmically? Why are intoxicants a problem? Because if you create karmas of destroying your discernment on purpose, you see it? Hopefully this is all hitting at the same time. This is a lot. But hopefully all these points are now hitting at the same time. The one resource you have to get out of all of this mess, the one thing that basically saves you from this entire thing is your discernment, and making your discernment in your mind incredibly bright, incredibly sharp, incredibly lucid, incredibly perceptive, incredibly not hallucinating, right? The opposite of hallucinating. This is your one resource to get out of all of this. So that's why it's listed among your 5 aggregates. Discernment is there because this is the thing that, as a spiritual person, as a religious person, as a Buddhist, that basically is one of the huge things that's getting you out of the problem. So if you consume intoxicants to make your discernment less on purpose, the karmic result is that later, when that karma ripens and becomes a fruit, when it blooms and becomes a new body and becomes a new mind and becomes a new environment and so forth, because karma has all these different effects, you have an environment that's more heedless, more out of control. You have a body that's more heedless, more out of control. You have a mind that's more heedless, more out of control. So even though, just like with killing as a soldier, there's temporary benefits you can get right now by killing if you're a professional killer, right? It's obvious. This is a multi-trillion-dollar industry for a reason. Being really good at killing can be really profitable, but it creates negative karma. So the practical benefit and monetary benefit and so forth you get right now, from a Buddhist standpoint, isn't worth it, because the karma that's coming from doing that, the karmic effect is really bad. Likewise, the karmic effect of reducing your discernment on purpose is having less discernment in the future, which means you don't have this resource you need in the future. You don't have that resource that you need to get out of the problem. You see it? And and in particular, if you've taken vows to not screw up your discernment, on and then you do it anyway and you do that on purpose, the karma from this is now not just a normal karma of screwing up your discernment, which is already, if you read that sutra, is already really bad. It's already really bad. But now you've also screwed up your discernment while lying to a Buddha about what you were going to do with your life. You promised a Buddha, listen, I'm not going to screw up my discernment by taking these kinds of substances and so forth. I promise you this, just for this lifetime, I won't do that anymore. If you've taken the 5 precepts, this is what you're agreeing to. So then if you go, actually, I want the temporary benefits that come from screwing up my discernment, like having more heart health by drinking wine, and like having slightly more neuro regeneration from taking hallucinogens, and from some of the interesting spiritual things that might happen sometimes, not all the time, but occasionally by taking hallucinogens. I want all of that, so I'm going to break my vows. That karma is now hundreds of thousands of times worse than it would have been if you hadn't taken the vow. So this is why I'm so serious about it. And if you, again, if you'd like to know what the Buddha's reaction was and what the criteria the Buddha placed on intoxicants was, in the Vinaya, the example that's given is a young monk dips the tip of a blade of grass into some alcohol and goes like this and puts it on his tongue. His intent must have been, right? I'd like to get a little bit of this intoxicating substance because I've never had that feeling before. I don't know what it does. Sorry, you've broken your vow. You're out. There's the door. Sorry, Your intent was to fuck up your mind, and you took a substance and put it in there to fuck up your mind. That breaks the vow. The vow is done now. You're out. The door's over there. You understand? This is how serious the Buddha took it. So why a couple thousand years later, with substances that are much more interesting than alcohol, we don't take it seriously? I don't take that as an advancement in our knowledge. I take that as a sign of degeneration. And the fact that there are now more and more people in the Buddhist circles saying this is a cool thing to do, this is a good thing to do, I see this as a sign of degenerate times. Because if you read the texts are extremely clear about this, and the logic is extremely precise, and the logic fits entirely with all of the other ethical principles in terms of karma in Buddhism. So I would implore anyone that's serious about practice, even if you can, in reality, get some temporary benefits from hallucinogens, I would implore you not to do this if you've taken vows. In particular, if you've taken vows, don't do this. It's not good. You know. Okay, my friends. Uh, if you have some substances that do things to you because you have a medical condition and you need to take some, like if you're dying of cancer and you want to smoke some weed or something because your doctor said that's better than taking a barbiturate. Okay, fine, I get it, right? It's better for pain, less side effects, this and that, allows you to eat. It's a medical thing. But if you're doing that because you're pretending you have back pain and you want to get free weed from the California government, this is clearly breaking your vows. You know what I mean? Okay. Hopefully, I probably haven't changed any minds, but okay. I'll just go with this, and then I gotta run because I told my wife I wouldn't be too late. So, blue eyes in terms of PTSD and so forth. This is what I mean. I think we're maybe, I don't know, a decade or so away from uh, having worked out this amount of hallucinogen of this kind helps with this kind of condition most of the time. We're working on that right now. And at some point, we'll have real data on it and it'll be part of our medical knowledge. Right now, we're not there, you know? So it's not quite yet a medical thing. And if you do those things outside of the realm of medicine, to try to get the medicinal effect. It's a gray area in terms of, are you doing it just for medicine? Maybe you are. And if you are, it might not be breaking your vows. At the same time, though, if you do it the first time for medicine and then spiritual things happen, and then next time you do it because you want more spiritual things and you want the medicinal effect, now you're breaking your vows because you're doing it to increase heedlessness and have hallucinations, and that's against your vows. You understand? So it very quickly becomes something that breaks your vows if you hold vows. If you don't hold vows, it's kind of your business. You know what I mean? It's not up to anyone else but you. And even if you hold vows, it's up to you, of course. But I wouldn't recommend it. And I know I'm in a minority in this, but I come with receipts. If somebody tells you, "Oh, this is fine and it's not against your vows and whatever," ask them, "Can you show me where it says that in the canon?" And then read whatever they send you really carefully and see if it actually says that. Because I've just sent you sources from the Mahayana and Theravada that are extremely clear in saying, unless it's for medicine and that's your intent and you're not abusing the medicine, it breaks your vows and your vows are broken. And not only that, that when you deliberately make your mind less discerning and you don't know what you're doing in terms of ethics, that this is by nature negative. So unless you're doing it not for that, but for something else, in other words, for a medical purpose, then you're creating a negative karma related to making your mind more dull, which is not something you want to do as a practitioner. Purple guy. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, all of us have done stupid stuff before we started training. Some of us still do stupid stuff even when we go into training. You just keep refining your behavior and making it better and better, refining your mind, making it better and better, and eventually you overcome the stupid shit you did in the past. You know? uh so yeah, eventually you overcome it. You've got to you got to work it out of the system in one way or the other, either through purification or through accumulating a lot of merit or whatever. But there, you work it out. Okay. Jay, sometimes the winds and stuff they just move around if you're doing stuff with concentration. And I think like a lot of our emotions, they start here. So if you're generating emotions that are quite powerful, you may be feeling more movement, especially because you have more concentration. You may be feeling more of that movement because you're more concentrated. Uh, okay. All right, my friends. I know there's 20 of you here now. Um, Thank you all for being here. As I am wont to do, I will now bid you farewell. I will also remind you, because we're now in the second half of the month, if you that sweetgrass wine, I know you got to put it down. The sweetgrass wine, the muscadine from the countryside. Yeah, can be good stuff. Trust me. If they invent a pill tomorrow that makes it so that you can drink all the alcohol and do all the stuff and it never affects your mind, I would do all the stuff because it's delicious. I'm a former hospitality guy. I mean, it's not about the stuff itself. It's about the intoxicating effect. Okay, so all the medical people listening, invent a pill that makes you not get high or drunk when you do all this stuff so that the rest of us Buddhists can enjoy it. There's 100 million of us on the planet. It's a big market. Invent the pill. Okay, my friends. As I said, we're in the second half of the month. If you'd like a way to contribute, I do all this for free. I make a lot of phone calls, talking to people about their practice. Do all these lives. There's more content coming. If you'd like to support the channel, great way to do it. Send a donation through PayPal, Venmo, or you can join one of the courses. The courses have material that, on my side at least, that I teach for free anyway. So I'm not hiding information behind a paywall. But if you join the school course, there's a whole community training in my stuff much more seriously, much more consistently. So that's a great way you can contribute to the channel regularly, is by joining the school course. Also, if you want the physical aspects of training and meditation, along with the mental aspects, me and Neil Ripsky. Neil is a Shaolin lineage holder. He's teaching Shaolin Lohan Palm, which one of the moderators can put in the chat. And that has the physical aspects and the energetic aspects of training and meditation. So, Lohan Palm, really, really wonderful. Neil, lovely guy, been training for 40 years, pretty serious in his Buddhist practice, pretty serious in his sort of Buddho Taoist practice, much am I. you know, uh, all of these elements are there to make your meditation practice go even better. I do these practices, but I don't teach them because you have to know a lot to teach them. So if you wanted to support me, part of the funds that go through lohanpalm.com also go to me. So Neil and I are working together on that project since I'm teaching some of the meditation through that course. So final note, if you want to do retreats with me, I don't do very many retreats in person because I like people to do retreat where they are. That's much more beneficial for you than spending somebody asked earlier in the stream, how much does a retreat cost? You got to fly halfway across the world half the time, and that's going to cost $500 or $1,000 or $2,000 or whatever just to get there and have the lodgings and the food and whatever. Save the money, do the retreat at home, deal with the difficulties that come with doing it at home, and you will be better for it most of the time. Um, However, if you want to do some retreat with me in person, I'll tell you for a fact, Lohan people are going to be seeing a lot more of me than only meditation people. I'm going to be doing retreats with Neil to do the Lohan stuff probably much more often than I do retreats in person for meditation only. So if you'd like to hang out with me a bit at some point, join the Lohan thing, do the Lohan thing, and then you can come do internal martial arts, health arts, and meditation as one complete package with Neil and I. The first retreat for that is going to be sometime next year, February or March. Yeah, that's coming. And it's probably going to be in Scotland, we've decided. This is the first time I'm actually saying it's going to be here. But Neil and his wife want to come to Scotland. And it will probably be somewhere in Scotland or at least somewhere in the UK. So if you want to come hang out with me sometime early next year for a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, depending on what we decide, um, do the Lohan thing, and then you can come do the full thing. Change the body, change the energy system, change the mind as one package. Yeah. All right, my friends. Thank you so much for being here. Hope to see you again soon. Try not to die before I do. And I will be back on tomorrow, same time, same place, probably 8:30 London.